Hello and welcome to today's presentation created specifically for Dental Trade Alliance members. We're honored to present as part of your two-day virtual Regulatory Affairs and Standards workshop. Today's topic is preparing now for EU and global UDI. We will be discussing best practices concerning UDI preparation related to dental products. Focusing on UDAMED, we'll give a quick update on Brexit and a quick summary on other emerging regional mandates. I'm Angela Alexandro, Head of Marketing for Life Sciences. Submit questions at will in the Q&A panel. We'll answer as many as possible after the presentation. First, a little bit about ReadTech. We specialize in the preparation, submission, and lifecycle data management of medical device UDI product information. ReadTech's an industry expert in SPL, that's structured product labeling, participating in the US FDA pilot and other trade groups. We've submitted over 500,000 SPLs to FDA Good ID, and annually it's about 31% of the Good ID electronic records. We serve some of the world's largest device manufacturers, about half of the top 30 ranked by annual revenues. Additionally, ReadTech collaborates with industry standards providers and various organizations who need to bring UDI education to their member groups. Today's presenters, both from ReadTech, Gary Sainer, Senior Manager of Information Solutions, and Andrew Pfeiffer, Senior Account Executive. And with that, I will turn the agenda over to Mr. Gary Sainer, who will take us through today's presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Angela. And Andrew and I are privileged to put this information together and provide it to you. Thank you for that opportunity. Would like to touch on some of the activities related to the European Union. Specifically, we'll lay a little bit of groundwork on the regulations and some timing, and then spend a good portion of the time on some suggestions about how to prepare and comply with the UDI registration. Andrew then will have some lessons learned that he wants to share with you, and talk about the ReadTech experience, and then we'll finish up with some questions and answers at the end. So our first little topic is to do a little bit of background on the European Union medical device regulation itself and the timing that is surrounding those particular activities. One of the things that you'll be aware of right up front is that in the European arena, the regulatory reform has completely rewritten the directives that are still in effect, but about to see some major changes. Those three directives are being replaced by two regulations: the medical devices regulation and the in vitro diagnostics regulation. Good news about that is that these are legally binding, so you'll see uniform specifications and various regulations across all the member states. But right now you don't see that, and each of the member states might have a little bit different implementation based on a directive, and that's certainly possible. The bad news is that this really does clear the field and does set a whole new framework in place for medical devices and also in vitro diagnostics. So there's a lot to do. If you were to actually take a look at a guide that's provided by the European Commission, there's a whole list of things to do. We're going to focus in on just the number 9 there, the master implementation plan, and actually that is really made up of a number of sub-projects. And for this particular session, we're going to focus in on the unique device identification and the registration process. There are 4 major tenets of the requirements that relate to UDI. First one is identifying the product, the physical product. So that is done by adding a UDI to the device label and packaging in both a human readable form and an automatic identification form. Typically that's a 1-dimension or a 2-dimensional barcode. A subset of all those medical devices would need to have direct marking. So if they are reusable, and for this particular audience, the dental industry, that is certainly the case for a lot of the instruments. So we'll keep a close eye and talk a little bit more about direct marking. The third major tenet is reporting the device identifier and device attributes to UDAMED. The last one, and not to be neglected, is including UDI and annual reports. There's a whole host of post-market surveillance documents. UDI does need to be included in the patient implant card. So there's a number of surrounding SOPs and other practices that you'll need to modify to include UDI. Now, as to the timing, there is two very important dates. The MDR date of application, just very close now, May 26, 2021. And a year later, the date of application for the in vitro diagnostics regulation. The UDAMED, the actual database to store a lot of this information, is now scheduled to be fully functional as of May 2022. And there's a 6-month period following that announcement, and that is the beginning of an 18th month required registration period for legacy devices, MDR devices, and also in vitro diagnostics. You do need to register immediately upon a serious event. So that's a precondition to report a serious incident to the UDAMED vigilance module. Now, prior to that date of May 2022, the European Commission has released modules and already has released the UDAMED actor module back in December of 2020. So you are able to voluntarily go to that particular module and request a single registration number, SRN. And this September 2021, we do expect the UDI module and the certificate module to be opened up and for voluntary submissions. And then we'll see about the other 3. So those grand total of 6 modules are to be fully functional and with a audit all in place by May 2022. Now, just to keep the European Union in scope, there is on the second row of this pretty busy chart, some milestones that we just highlighted, and you can refer to this chart for various other regional health authorities as they come into play. The one that I will touch on is the European or the United Kingdom row down second from the bottom here. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that, but there is a requirement to now, because of Brexit, address your medical devices that you're placing on the market into the UK. A little bit more details on an upcoming slide. And if we were to stretch this chart out, we see 2023 and beyond, again, a lot of activity with the European Union and a number of activities there. UK in particular, in June of 2023, Great Britain stops recognizing the CE mark and EU certificates and so on. There's a UK competent authorization mark as well. So a lot of things coming into play, and the groundwork is changing quite dramatically over the course of time. So this is the frequently asked question that we receive about UK. Now that Brexit has occurred, what is going on? So there's a lot of detail on the slide, but I want to highlight a few items. There's new policy that is in place as of January 1 of 2021. And if you had not previously registered your device, or if you are bringing out a new device, placing it on the market, you will need to register those particular medical devices. The European Union, let me highlight that point, as of January, does not recognize UK-based notified bodies. So that has spurred a number of notified bodies to create offices based in EU. You may have engaged some of those notified bodies, so keep that in mind. That's going to be a requirement to continue to place your product on the European Union market. For the UK business, you will need to have a UK-based notified body and a UK responsible person. So that may have already been in place if you had national registration. If you were using the EU umbrella to distribute products in the UK, then you definitely need to secure a UK-based notified body and set up establish a UK responsible person. Couple deadlines there throughout this year. Various classes come into play. There's deadlines and the grace period ends on these particular dates. And then by next January, the last phase, all the class 1 devices will need to be registered. The other thing I'll quickly mention is that going out to July 2023, UK will at that point stop recognizing the European Union CE mark and any certificates that are based on the European Union notified bodies. So they're going to move everything inside their own region at that point. Now, interesting is that the Northern Ireland activity is actually, that region is carved out and will be following the European Union medical device regulation and IVDR. So that's going to be a little bit different than all the other policies followed by England, Scotland, and Wales. And we'll see how that fleshes out, but that is noteworthy if you do business into Northern Ireland. All right, I have summarized some of the UDI requirements for the US. In most noteworthy here is the September deadline of next year. In a similar little note card kind of summary, here's information about the European Union, and there is a similar little note card on the UK. So a lot of information on that. We'll cover some of those details today, but we'll leave those little note cards for you to go back and look at your leisure, when you download the materials. Let's move our discussion over to preparing and complying with the European Union. And just a quick walkthrough to refresh the UDI concepts and how they're actually prepared and required to be followed. I know some of this is probably a repeat for those in the audience, some of those in the audience, but those that are coming in new probably need a little bit of a groundwork to work off of. The UDI is a unique identifier. It's good around the world and able to identify a particular device. In fact, there's two components that make up a UDI. The first one being this device identifier, which is mandatory, and it identifies the labeler, so the particular manufacturer, and it also includes an identification of a particular model or version of a medical device. So if there is a new version that you come out with, and it's significantly different than the previous one, then you will be creating a new device identifier for that. Obviously, a new product would have its own device identifier. The second part of that UDI is a production identifier, and that's conditional. So you might have none of these particular attributes, or you might have all of them, or a combination thereof. So if manufacture date, expiration date, lot or batch number, serial number, for the European Union, if there's software identification, if any of those are connected with your particular product, then they would need to be included in the UDI. So the way the full UDI is created is simply bring both of those components together. And for the device identifier, I'm using GS1 as an example here. And GS1 has some, as the other issuing agencies, a code, in this case, a parentheses 01, that is an alert for any reader that the following information is a device identifier. And in similar fashion, there's a number of dedicated codes for the manufacturing date, expiration date, lot, batch, and software ID, and so on. So you are able to construct a rather long string of numbers in this case for the full UDI. How's it actually represented? Well, we mentioned we need to get both of those components and make sure the PI is there, but it may not be included. And that particular UDI can be represented either in a one-dimensional barcode, or it can be in a two-dimensional barcode. So I'm again showing GS1 128 linear and a GS1 data matrix in a 2D. In addition, the human readable text needs to be presented, and the particular standards that you use need to be in conformance with a issuing agency that is approved by the European Commission. So in this case, GS1, HIBIC, and ICC BBA are all approved issuing agencies, including IFA, which is the German pharmacy standard, not used too often. We'll see how that works out. But I do understand HIBIC is widely used in dental trade association. That's certainly a valid issuing entity to use, so no problem using HIBIC, IBC, HIBC identifiers in those particular companies that want to make use of that. How does UDI appear on the label? So there's a number of things that come into play, and we don't have time to dive into all of them, but at a minimum, the medical device symbol with MD in a rectangular box, warnings in various languages, and there's an increased use of the electronic information for use. For today's discussion, this is the example of how you would make use of a two-dimensional barcode and slide in the UDI into this particular. And this could be a little bit of a problem with all these changes. You might have real estate issues, so keep that in mind. All right, with all that under our belt, I would like to move over to the 4 C's of UDI device registration. So there's 4 steps along the way. The first one is create an environment. Secondly, collect the data. Thirdly, cleanse the data. And fourthly, comply with the actual regulations. So the first 3 are actually all in preparation of the final step of doing the actual compliance. But we're going to take a look at a little bit more details in each one of these steps because they do have some subpoints that we need to talk about. The first step, create this UDI environment. I show 3 sub items here. And first, this is not too unfamiliar with what you have done with the FDA. So create your team, make sure that they have education and are trained on particular regulations, and find out what regulations apply to your portfolio. And that can be a pretty big project in and of itself. But then in step C down there, you need to evaluate your situation, find out what gaps you have and need to address. We get a lot of questions about the rules and the timing. So I'm going to dive into that particular one a little bit and give a little bit more information. You'll need to take a look at your portfolio and create 3 different buckets. The MDD, those medical device directives, the active implantable medical device directive, and an in vitro diagnostic directive. So if you have products that are currently under those directives, you may elect not to place them on the market after the date of application for various reasons, economic reasons, revenue, whatever. Challenge of complying with MDR is too great, so they become discontinued. Now, they will have no connection with the upcoming UDAMED unless there's a serious event connected with some of those devices. Then you will have to report that into UDAMED, and as a prerequisite of that, register them in UDAMED UDI module. So there's some special identifiers for those. They will never have to have a UDI placed on them. The same is true in the second bucket, the legacy devices. These are, again, same as the first, except the difference is that you continue to place them on the market after the date of application. There's some criteria and time limits based on whether it's a medical device or in vitro diagnostic. You have 3 years for a medical device, assuming the certificate is still valid. no significant changes, and your notified bodies still operating and able to support that activity. So that is an interesting group. It does allow us to transition so that you can continue to place product on the market even after the date of application. The third bucket includes those devices that might be equivalent to one of your legacy devices in all respects, intent of use, functionality, safety, and so on. But now they have gone through the rigors of the MDR review, NIVDR review, and now they're compliant to this new regulations. And you can place those on the market. So they have some requirements. Obviously, need to register those particular devices and follow the timing and all the vigilant activities surrounded those MDR devices. There are some particular milestones that I want to highlight, and this is going to be a rather busy chart, but let's start off real simple with the legacy medical devices. What I'd like to highlight is the date of application for these devices. You have the 3-year period of time where you can still place them on the market. There's a 1-year sell-off, but those particular devices eventually will have to be pulled off the market, or those devices would need to comply with the MDR. And there's some milestones for the MDR, either new or equivalent devices. There's some requirements for placing UDI on the label, and it's staggered by class. It's not all at one time. If there's a reusable item and it needs direct marking, then UDI in a product has a staggered timeline as well. This whole conversation is repeated with IVDR. Timing is a little bit different, but the noteworthy point is that the registration of legacy devices, MDR, and IVDR are all now in the same particular window. So this is going to get really crowded and real busy, not only for you as manufacturers, but also for the commission. So there is words of wisdom there that say, you know what, I really want to start early and make use of that voluntary submission period and take care of some of these registrations so I don't hit the bottleneck of everyone trying to submit, you know, at one time. Let's take a quick look at the dental-related guidelines. So there's a couple of things that I quickly highlighted here. There's additional information in the appendix with various links to guidances and so on. But sterilization is certainly widely used in the dental industry. And there are a couple fields that you'll need to report on, whether it's supplied sterile or whether sterilization needs to be administered by the user, and you need to select a particular method. So heads up on that. Not uncommon or not different than what the FDA has, but it's still in place. And we alluded to this earlier, whether items are single use and basically disposable, or do they have extended life? Are they reused over multiple patients, multiple times, and therefore they fall into this direct marking requirement. There's a number of implants that are used in dental world. There's some requirements and a guidance that talks about implants, and there's a little bit more requirements, by the way, for implants and making sure that they are identified up to the time of use. It's more stringent than what the FDA has. Procedure packs, we might know them in the US as convenience kits. Again, you might have multiple devices that are collected together and put in place. This might be even a surgical tray or some other type of packaging that is able to help your end users. There is this concept of identifying the overall item, and in some cases, you do need to identify the components depending on the actual packaging and so on. I mentioned this earlier, HIBIC is widely used and certainly available as an issuing agency. And then for the custom medical devices, I refer to this medical device coordination group guideline. There's some information in there about dental crowns and molds and so on. So you can look in the appendix and get some more information about that. So let's go back to our steps. There's actually 3 more steps related to creating the environment. Create your plan, prepare the infrastructure, and establish a UDI data solution. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the submission solution and what your options are. There's on this diagram showing 4 different methods of addressing this particular requirement. The first one there, it makes use of the European Commission web interface into UDAMED. And you would be able to go to that particular website and have some data written out in front of you and actually key that information in from the keyboard with manual entry. If you had an XML file that met all the specifications, rather rigorous activity, you could upload that as well and satisfy the requirements by using manual entry. The other 3 methods make use of the machine-to-machine capabilities. This would be electronic gateway. They refer to it as the data exchange, and you can have access point that allows you to submit the data in bulk fashion electronically. There's no transcription errors, and it does have some certainly some advantages over the manual entry. The way to have that XML file created and submitted is to either build a program and attack that particular project and embark on putting that in place inside your firewall, or you could buy a solution, install it, and do updates and training and so on. The third option is to rent, and by that I mean a software as a solution model. Basically, you are by way of a subscription, able to connect to a hosted solution, a piece of software that allows you to upload data, and then that particular package builds the necessary XML files and submit it and confirms acknowledgement and so on. That's actually the ReadTech solution here at the bottom, where we take care of all the nuances of building that XML file and submitting it in a particular protocol and handling all the acknowledgements related to that. Okay, we're finally to step 2, collecting data. So we did a lot of homework, a lot of background in preparing the environment, but now collecting the data. So if you have not already, you'll need to select a product ID. And again, we alluded to the GS1 and HIPAA are certainly the most common. There's something called the European Medical Device Nomenclature, which is an outgrowth of the Italian C&D nomenclature, but and that's different than the global medical device nomenclature that the FDA made use of. So just a heads up on that. And the second part, B here, is to assign identifiers to all your items in your portfolio. This can be a little bit challenging. Sounds straightforward, but when you start to look at your products and the different packaging levels and your kits and your various ways in which you deliver items, this does have some nuance to it. We do get a lot of questions about the new concept that the European Union has called a basic UDI-DI. And this was not present in the FDA, so there's no background that you can point to and say, oh, this is how we did it before. No, this is a brand new activity. So a couple things about the basic UDI, and just for discussion purposes, I'm going to use the GS1 implementation. There's a HIPAA version of this as well. GS1 calls it the global model number. Yeah, there's some specs and a link there that you can generate a check digit. But in summary, in this case, the GS1 global model number is 25 characters maximum. It includes the company prefix that you already subscribe to for your G10s. It includes a model reference number that you have on your desk to create. So this is a new totally new activity for you is to come up with this particular identifier and 2 check characters. I compared that specification against what is commonly used for device identifier, like a G1014, for example, where there's an indicator digit. GMDN has no such indicator. And the check digit in the device identifier is a single digit, and this is always represented in a barcode format as well, but there's no barcode connected to a GMDN. It's never to appear on the package label. It's really just an identifier for database purposes. All right, so if you were to take a look at your portfolio, maybe you manufacture, let's say, plastic forceps, and it would have a connected basic UDI DI with it. And your forceps might actually be grouped together, 3 in a pouch, and you might have 2 pouches in a box. So all that hierarchy layered on top of the basic forcep product is connected to a buddy. And in your portfolio, you might have other similar products that you want to put in the same group. So you might have a stainless steel version, you might have a stainless steel with locking, and so on. Literally, you can have thousands of these as you start to create the groupings. There is some common requirements. So all the attributes for the group, the basic UDI DI, must be applicable to each of the devices inside it. So there's a lot of detailed attributes for the individual items, and they're obviously dedicated to the device, but there are some common attributes that you have to stay keep that in mind and adhere to those particular guidelines. All right, so going back to our checklist, step 2, we're collecting data. The next 2 here are assemble the UDI data and establish data governance. We'll take a look at the current values. I mentioned that there were a number of attributes at the basic UDI level, and here's 36 in total that must be common for all the individual devices. But at the device level, there's 76 additional. So this is way over and above what you had collected for the FDA. It's roughly twice the number of attributes that need to be collected. All right, moving on to step 3. So step 3 is to cleanse the data. Now that you have the environment in place, you've identified all your products, and you're to the point now, step 3, cleansing the data. You want to make sure that this data is accurate, it's up to date, normalize it to the specifications, and establish versions and approval controls. So you'll start to see that over the course of time, as you cleanse data, you have multiple versions of this particular field, and this attribute now needs to have some administration on top of it, governance about how does this get updated when there's a change, who approves it, that sort of thing. And step 4, complying with the actual regulations. All that was preparatory work, and now we get into the actual complying with the regulations step. So to make the actual submissions, you certainly will need to create your account, and there's ways to go ahead and do that. UDAMED has the ability right now to create an account in the actor module. You'll need to submit your data. We talked about the actual method, so you prepared a method and want to make sure that those particular records were successful and track the acknowledgements. And then over the course of time, you need to maintain that data and update systems and comply with any changes that come down the pike. The European Commission I would guess that they would make some changes after they first roll it out. As it matures, they're now expected to create what they refer to as a minimum viable product, and expecting to have changes going on. So you'll need to keep a close eye on that. So in summary, there's create a UDI environment step, collect that UDI data, cleanse that data, and then actually carry through with the regulations, and then you're able to go forward. I'm going to now turn this over to Andrew, and thank you for that particular timing here that we were able to cover some of the background and information. Andrew, can you give us some lessons learned?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. That was a lot of great information that you just provided. So hopefully everybody was just taking some notes. So now we're going to move over to some of the lessons we've learned so far. So first, I want to just take a look at, I guess thinking globally when preparing your UDI implementation planning. You want to first, make sure that the EU is part of your global UDI solution. The FDA, for those of you that, whether you're in the process of, completing your good ID submissions to the FDA, or maybe you haven't even started yet, it's crucial to start thinking about UDI from a global perspective. Even if you don't sell outside the US, you should be thinking about it because, you may one day. But basically, you'll want to avoid building out a single point solution to each health authority. Not reinventing the wheel. So basically, you want to work smart, not hard. And that will allow you want to move that to more of a master data solution. That way you can expand to those other, health authorities and regulatory bodies around the world. Then you also want to start early. So, by the MDR date of application, you want to start to kind of prep and assign your basic UDI DIs as well as your UDI DIs to your products, as Gary had just mentioned previously. And if you're class 1 device manufacturer, start to self-certify those. One of the things that you can do now is, register in the actor module, which is the only module within UDAMED that is live. So you can now, register to receive your SRN, which is your single registration number. So you can begin to prepare and then collect the documentation before registering. So, working with your competent authority to get that SRN number. Some competent authorities, you can expect to, get that SRN probably within a couple days. Others, it could be, weeks, maybe months before you get that single registration number. So it really all depends. And for those of you that are maybe a non-EU manufacturer, you would want to work with your authorized rep first before that gets passed, before you register, before it gets passed to your competent authority. And then lastly here, the European Commission quoted saying, there's expected to be a high number of medical devices on the market, and to anticipate a bottleneck in reviews by notified bodies. So again, this goes back to starting early to avoid that expected backlog of the European Commission and notified body support. With regards to notified bodies, there are currently only, I believe, 19 right now for MDR and really only 4 for IVDR. So yeah, I mean, there's a very limited amount of notified bodies. So, whatever you can do to start as early as possible to kind of get going on that, it is definitely a best practice. Next slide, Gara. And then with regards to watching out for updates, just looking out for any specific, any sort of changes to anything that the European Commission puts out. There was one kind of change that I'm sure everybody's probably aware of at this point, when the European Commission stated that the voluntary submission date to the UDI module, which was originally in May, that got postponed until September. So they didn't make a big announcement out of it. So it's just kind of a small little blurb, on their site. But that was something that was an initial change. That was a change that just recently came out. Additionally, there was also the most recent updated data dictionary and submission schema and specifications for MedTech Europe. through the European Commission just recently came out as well. So just expect, frequently, updated timing and guidance, from from the European Commission. And stay informed through sessions like the webinars that RETEC puts on. You can also visit our Knowledge Center where we'll constantly update the industry on those different updates. And next is to prepare your infrastructure and your UDI data. System upgrades can be very time consuming. And the UDI, EU UDI data set has twice the number of the US UDI attributes. So it can be a Herculean task to go through that data set. If not properly managed, the right tools are not properly used. If you're not pooling the right resources. Because there is just so much more information involved with the EU. There's much more data collection. There's more cleansing, validation. It is going to take it's going to take a lot longer to go through that process of planning, preparing, and ultimately, when you get to the point of submitting. So you want to make sure that you're preparing way ahead of time. And then ultimately, leveraging the UDAMED playground once it's open to additional manufacturers. Right now, at this point, it's only limited to the data exchange working group, but eventually it will be available to all manufacturers. So you want to be able to take advantage of that when it is available. And then lastly is the RETEC can help out. So we're available to help with any specific questions you have, relating to EU UDI, global UDI. So we have a team of subject matter experts that can help out with that with regards to training, industry updates, and then with, of course, the collection and the validation, the cleansing of the EU UDI data. We have specific proprietary templates that we've developed in a software platform that can facilitate in the validation and the submission process and the data management of that global UDI data to the various different health authorities, and also to engage that global UDI data management submission hub to help ensure that you have a strategy in place, so that way further down the line, as you start to expand into multiple different health authorities, that you can execute and deploy a strategy that will help you get to where you want to go. Next slide, Gara. All right, perfect. So ultimately, single source enables medical device manufacturers to quickly react and affordably comply with the business critical product data submission requirements across the globe. So it provides a single, scalable, and flexible data management platform, which basically allows users to collect, maintain, validate, and submit both their regulatory and commercial data to trading partners and regulators around the world. So as you can see in that little diagram down there, and then on this slide, you'll see the data workflow that when you contract with RETEC, you basically transfer that UDI data in multiple different ways and engage with us in multiple different ways. So, if you want to, work with RETEC utilizing our interface, you can basically use a spreadsheet that we developed, and you can transfer that data from your, PLM, MDM, ERP system to us through that Excel or XML file into our system, where you can manage that data through a configurable workflow. And then our system will package it up in the required file format and send that to the health authority that is requiring that specific set of data. There's also another type of engagement where, if you're looking for more of a integrated approach, where you feel that you would want to keep that data in your system rather than having RETEC manage it for you, we can set up what's called an API integrated solution, and then that would be again that would keep the data within your platform, and we can integrate within your ERP system, setting up APIs to call that data from your system into RETEC, and then ultimately submitting that to the downstream health authority. Next slide, Gary. Yep, and so that basically concludes the presentation for today. So if you do have any questions, there's an email address down there that you can reach out to us to. There's also a phone number. So I guess we'll end here, and I guess we can start taking some questions if anybody has any.